A couple specifics. A couple weeks ago, Peter asked you a question, and you said the president was not referring to ISIS when he dismissed some terrorists to the New Yorker magazine as the JV squad. The Washington Post, I believe last week, gave you 4 Pinocchios for that.
I saw that.
The president yesterday went ahead and, I'm glad you saw that. The president yesterday went ahead and doubled down on it and said, I was not referring to ISIL, he said. Why do you and the president continue to say something that has been proven to be false?
It's not proven to be false. I'm just going to go back to I did this when Peter asked it too, but let me just read what the president said. The president was drawing a distinction between core al-Qaeda and a range of local groups. What the president said is there is a distinction between the capacity and reach of a bin Laden and a network that is actively planning major terrorist plots against the homeland versus jihadists who are engaged in various local power struggles and disputes, often sectarian. The point is the president was describing the wide variety of extremist groups that have sprouted up over the last several years in this region of the world. Some of them have greater capabilities than others. Some of them do not pose a threat to the homeland, or at least don't have the capacity to plan what the president described as major terrorist plots against the homeland.
Yeah, but David Remnick told PolitiFact the interview took place on January 7th, that the president was referencing a specific event that had happened just days before, January 3rd, when Islamic State raised this flag, took over Fallujah. So in that interview, in that context, the president was referring to something. I understand you're making this more general, but according to David Remnick was saying, he was referring in the interview to something that specifically happened 4 days before, Islamic State taking over Fallujah. So that sounds like a direct whether he used the name ISIS, ISIL, he was referring to an event from 4 days before where Islamic State took over Fallujah.
No. Ed, what the president was referring to is he was referring to jihadists who are engaged in various local power struggles and disputes, often sectarian. The president was not singling out a specific group. That's why he described jihadists, plural, power struggles, plural, disputes, plural. He's talking about the wide variety of groups and indicating that we don't have to be worried about every single one of these groups. Many of these groups aren't particularly sophisticated, don't have designs or the capability of attacking the United States homeland. Some of them are more influential, some of them do have greater capacity, and some of them have built up and demonstrated that capacity over the last several months, like ISIL has. But the fact is, at the time, what the president was talking about is drawing a clear distinction between core al-Qaeda and the wide variety of groups that are extremist organizations that are operating in this area. And even ISIL, which has demonstrated some substantial military capacity, as we've talked about, there are not indications right now that they are actively planning or that they have the capacity to carry out a widespread conspiracy along the lines of the plot that was organized by Osama bin Laden about 13 years ago this week. Their capacities are different, and that's the point that the president was trying to make. It means that our policy for dealing with them needs to be different. And the president is putting in place a strategy to deal with a threat that's posed by ISIL before they can find the kind of safe haven that would allow them to eventually build the capacity to carry out the kind of terror attack that we saw that was carried out.
The president